I said, okay, I'll let them know.
Thanks a lot.
You're welcome. Have a good day.
Well, ain't that glorious? Nothing like starting your day off with a May snow. Seems like we've got a nice clutch of eggs right there. That's 8 eggs out of a total of 10 layers. I think one thing I've noticed though is one of the ducks seems to be laying eggs that is very, very tiny in comparison to the other duck eggs. I mean, look at this, right? Ah. Well, so much for that tiny egg. It looks like I just dropped it and broke it. Oh well. Whenever I let the ducks out for the first time each morning, the khaki Campbells love to just sort of scan and scour the ground looking for easy slugs and worms. I've noticed that our puddle ducks still like to stay separate from the other ducks. They don't like to mix in with everybody else. So we're getting goslings here on our farm. I think we're supposed to get them tomorrow. I'm really kind of excited about the goslings showing up tomorrow. I'm pretty much ready. I have the brooder prepped and ready to go, all set up nice and clean to just try to keep the goslings warm, especially in these early weeks. Especially when we have so much snow! But I guess that's just weather in New England.
It's so easy to see that you're in love with me.
So I just got a call from my local post office. Apparently the goslings have arrived.
Put it at my front door. I've lost count of the times this has happened before. Not that I'm keeping score, 'cause I do the same for you, just like I'm supposed to do. I'm yours, you're mine. If you ever feeling blue, rest assured I've been there too. We just pick up where we left off, then we toe the line. That's fine. Sunday breakfast in bed, strawberry jam on some bread.
Just like the last time I picked up birds from the post office, it's always this like mix of anxiety and excitement. Like I'm excited that they're here. I'm worried that they're not gonna be okay, but I'm sure things will be just fine.
I'm yours, you're mine. If you ever feeling blue, rest assured I've been there too.
They like to what?
They like to be sung to.
Ah.
He was singing, they cried everything. I said, okay, I'll let them know.
Well, thank you very much.
You are so very welcome.
Thanks a lot.
You're welcome. Have a
If
good day.
you ever feeling blue, rest assured I've been there too. We just pick up where we left off, then we toe the line. 'Cause I do the same for you, just like I'm supposed to do. I'm yours, you're mine. If you ever feeling blue, rest assured I've been there too. We just pick up where we left off, then we toe the lines. That's fine.
So far, the goslings have arrived without a hitch. This has actually been a pretty smooth transition so far. I've ended up with 31 goslings, which is 20 less than I had originally planned. But unfortunately, I was actually trying to buy from 2 different hatcheries, and we had some issues on the second hatchery, and so we had to cancel. I ended up with an order of 30 goslings from that original hatchery. They threw in a bonus gosling, they usually do. They are a mix of 2 different breeds. So we have pilgrim goslings and we have embden goslings. Apparently with the pilgrims, they're the ones that you can tell their gender based on their color, even as goslings. And so I gotta look it up, but like the darker gray ones are either male or female pilgrims. The bigger guys who are like this with like a little bit more yellow to them with just a little bit of gray in them, these are the embden geese right here. Hello. Just to show you the difference in size here, this one right here is an embden, this one right here is a pilgrim. Over the next couple of days, I'm gonna be spending a ton of time with these guys. My goal is to try to get them to imprint on me. You know, that's when they start to see me as like a mother figure. I don't think I spent enough time with my ducklings when they were young, and that's part of why they're so afraid of me. And so Allison and I are both gonna spend a lot of time with these guys to try to get them familiar with us and used to us, because full-grown geese are a lot harder to manage than ducks, and I want these guys not to be vicious monsters on me.
Chores.
Oh, you're checking out my coat? Yeah? Do I feel nice and warm?
It's water. Here, have some more. Have some more. Have some more. Okay, so I'll try this one. It's a little deeper. It's easier. You're wondering what the heck's going on. Oop. Well, I guess you're feeling stronger. You had a sip. I mean, I don't know. Guys. Have another sip. Get glamour shots of us.
In terms of things that I'm considering here, you know, I've tried a slightly different brooder setup than I did last year. Number one, I made a much larger platform to put their water on. One of the worst problems I had with the ducklings was dealing with wet bedding and trying to keep the ducklings healthy and dry and not soaked with their wet bedding. And so I built a much larger platform that's basically 2x4s covered in hardware cloth. And what that does is it lets all the water drain out. And I even created a new feature that lets it drain out through the bottom towards the front of the room here. We have a cement floor with a drain. This is an old milk cooler room that I'm keeping them in. And so I just let the water drain down into that. The other piece is the bedding itself. Last year I just used pine wood shavings, and the ducklings were eating them. They would get wet and gross and disgusting. And so this year I'm trying to change it up. I actually put down a layer of peat moss first, and then I've put chopped straw on top of that. My thinking is the peat moss is gonna be super absorbent, and I'm gonna be able to scoop a lot of the really wet stuff out like it's kitty litter almost. And the chopped straw is also really absorbent. So my hope is that this does a better job for them. And then finally, the other major change that I made is actually in the heating system itself. Last year I used heat lamps, and they worked fine. But I've since heard some real horror stories, including my friend Jess over at Roots and Refuge, about brooding poultry with the heat lamps and having them explode and start a fire. I am very, very hypersensitive to fire risk, particularly here in this barn. And so what I've decided to do is actually try 2 different things, and I'm honestly a little bit nervous and watching this one carefully. One is I'm using ceramic heat lamps like the type you use for reptiles, and using those in kind of the standard brooder heat lamp. The other thing I'm trying out is I actually received what's known as sort of like an Ohio brooder, so it's like one of those brooder plates. So it's like a hot plate almost that the goslings can go underneath. I will probably just move to one method as these guys get a little bit older so that they have a little bit more space in the brooder. But right now I'm not sure what's gonna work better. If you guys keep watching these videos, you'll end up seeing what I end up going with here. I got to admit, I'm very excited about starting this new goose journey, or goose chase if you will. I mean, adding more animals to the farm, it's just one of those exciting initial moments. And I'm really happy that they're finally here. Look at them all, they're just sort of exploring the world. As far as the feed situation goes, I'm giving them organic, non-GMO, non-medicated chick starter. You know, it should do them just fine. I'm also giving them, you can see it here, this little bowl of chick grit. As far as the watering setup goes, this is another thing I'm going to be watching really closely, and I got to admit I'm a little nervous about. I actually have their water in feeders, so the idea is they will be able to drink, but they won't be able to make a mess. Again, one of the biggest goals I have is to try to eliminate any sort of wetness for the goslings. I don't want to get them wet. That's how they get sick. That's how they don't do well. And so I'm being very, very careful about that. My only concerns are that as these guys grow, I worry that they might not be able to get their heads all the way in there to drink properly. And number two, I worry about it being able to hold enough water, particularly if I have to leave the farm for a couple of hours and leave them on their own. I want to make sure I don't have to constantly babysit them because I think that could be a recipe for disaster. It doesn't seem like anybody is using our brooder plate. They all seem to be preferring the lamps. They don't seem like they're cold at all. I mean, they're giving each other plenty of space. They're not all huddled in a mass somewhere, which would be like the indicator that they're way too cold. I'm just going to keep monitoring and watching this, especially in these first couple of hours. What are you biting at, guy? You're just like air chomping.
My wristwatch is broken, my shoes are untied. Time is a-ticking, so is the tide. But I am not worried, things are what they are. Come rain or come shine or a shooting star.
So my buddy Tom just texted me and told me to Google geese teeth. Look at this. This is ridiculous. By the way, when you Google geese breeds for meat, here's what comes up. Look at number 4. Oh boy. It's about, I don't know, 4 hours later, and these guys are doing ridiculously well. Everybody's moving around, looking good. It doesn't look like I even have anybody who looks weak. So I'm excited. I'm really happy about that. I think one important thing that's worth noting is the air temperature in this room right now is 51 degrees. But if I'm looking at what the temperature is over by their heat lamps, it's actually doing much better than that. Everybody looks good. Like if it was too cold for them, they would actually all be huddled up really, really tightly. They're actually spaced out pretty well, which might even suggest that I've got the heat lamps a little too hot. But I'm okay with that for right now, especially as it gets colder tonight. It's supposed to drop back down into the 40s. Hey, old gosling, how are you? How about you? So I guess this marks the official start of Geese on the Farm. Keep watching and be sure to subscribe so you can follow along and watch these guys grow.